To understand why Peter is asking this question about how many times to forgive, it's helpful to back up just a bit to what we read last Sunday. Last Sunday, we read Jesus teaching the disciples how to handle sin in their community. If your brother sins against you, Jesus says, you should address it directly, one-on-one. And then if that doesn't work, you can find another friend or two and take them with you and try to address it. And if that doesn't work, you can take it to the whole church. And only after you've tried all those things can you break fellowship with the brother who's sinned. So for Peter, this instruction raises a question. Say my brother sins against me, and I confront him like you said, and he asks forgiveness. And say he keeps doing the same thing. How many times do I have to go through this whole forgiveness and restoration process before I can just ghost him? Before I can stop returning his texts? 7 times? That feels generous. Actually, Jesus says in this new kingdom we're getting started here, we're looking for exponential forgiveness. This kind of forgiveness is something that doesn't make sense in the world the way the world works now, the way things are set up. Here's a story, Jesus says. Imagine the CFO of a highly successful pyramid scheme, realizing that he's been skimming a little too much off the top. A lot of people under him owe him money, but even if he could collect all of those debts, he'd still never be able to repay the $87 billion that he owes. So he goes to the boss and he pleads for mercy, for just a little longer to pay back what he's taken. But the boss doesn't give him an extension. The boss forgives the $87 billion debt. So the CFO goes back to work walking on clouds. He's free of an enormous debt. He's got another chance. And this time, he's not going to disappoint the boss. So when he sees one of his minions who owes him $10,000, he says, "Pay up." He knows that the kind of mercy he just received isn't mercy for everyone. It's mercy that's secret for people at the highest levels. And he's not going to fail the boss again. The thing is, the boss wasn't just trying to free him from his debt. He was trying to free him from the whole messed up system of unjust gain that they're implicated in. But the CFO had lived in it too long. He didn't understand. He couldn't imagine that they could all get free of that system together. He couldn't imagine all of the debts being forgiven and the pyramid toppling. He could only picture the world working the way it had always worked for him. And so his inability to extend to others the forgiveness he'd received landed him right back into that destructive cycle. Our inability to forgive others, to imagine a different kind of world where everyone gets forgiven, a different way of relating, can keep us trapped in a torturous system too. You know, that scary last line of the gospel where Jesus says, "If you don't forgive each other from the heart, my heavenly Father will let you experience this same kind of torture." God doesn't have to force that torture on us. When we choose unforgiveness, we trap ourselves in torturous pain. Carrying around that burden of unforgiveness is its own kind of torture. I wonder who you are trying to forgive. A colleague who spread lies about you in the workplace? A partner who broke a promise? a kid in your class who won't stop bullying you, a family member blinded by narcissism, an abusive friend. I wonder what you're still trying to forgive in yourself. And I'm not your therapist, so I won't ask you where you feel the weight of unforgiveness in your body. But maybe it's tying your back in knots. Or maybe it's simmering in your belly, just waiting for a spark to make it flame up. Maybe it's a stone wall around your chest that's keeping you safe from feeling too much, and that is also keeping you alone. And I wonder if you could imagine being free of that weight. The way your shoulders might relax down, the way your breath might change. Forgiving 77 times doesn't mean pretending the damage wasn't done. It doesn't mean taking on the role of a martyr or refusing to stand up for yourself. It doesn't mean the other person gets everything in the divorce. It doesn't mean restoring a relationship with the person who keeps hurting you. At some point, it is okay to stop responding to those text messages from that bully. Forgiveness does not mean you have to restore a relationship with a person who has been abusive. But forgiving 77 times does mean giving up our right to seek vengeance. It means refusing to try to hurt them the way they hurt us. There's only one other place in the Bible where we see this number, 77, or it can also be translated 70 times 7. And that's in the very earliest chapters of Genesis. It's after Adam and Eve had failed to trust God in the garden, and sin is spreading out across the known earth. And we read about their sons, Cain and Abel. You know this story. Cain murders his brother. And as a result, Cain is forced to live as a wanderer instead of as a farmer at home with his family. This punishment is more than he can bear, Cain tells God. He's afraid that when he leaves home, he'll be killed. So God responds with compassion by putting a mark on Cain, a mark of protection, and promising that anyone who tries to hurt him will suffer God's vengeance 7 times over. With this promise that God will defend him, Cain sets off. And God does protect Cain. The next thing we read is a list of Cain's descendants. He marries, he has children and grandchildren, and then 5 generations down, there's a man named Lamech. And while we don't get the whole story on what happened with Lamech, it is recorded in Genesis that he says to his 2 wives, Ada and Zillah, listen to me. Wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me. I have killed a man for wounding me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. Lamech proclaims that he will retaliate against those who hurt him 77 times. We're just a few generations out of the Garden of Eden, and humans have decided that exponential vengeance is ours, not God's. And that it should be exponentially more violent. You hurt me, I'll kill you. So when Jesus says this to Peter, we don't forgive 7 times, we forgive 77 times. Jesus is calling back to this story. And he's saying, exponential vengeance is not ours. Exponential forgiveness is our way. And it's not easy to live in this new way of grace and mercy within the systems and the pyramid schemes that have been set up in the wake of Cain. But we've been given mercy. We've been forgiven. Forgiveness that we celebrate every week at this table. And the more we turn our gaze there to the mercy given to us, the more we may become able to forgive others. To name evil as evil, but to release our need to avenge it, to trust God with it, and to begin to live in the new way Jesus has opened for us, to live as citizens of this kingdom of heaven, to live as people who forgive.